The chapters that I read were chapters 7 and 8. First, I will begin by summarizing the introduction of the book. Basically, the point that I'm trying to make is that the US economy is reaching a point that needs help quickly. Currently, good jobs are disappearing overseas, and average wages are depressed by competition from other countries. The loss of America's position as leader of the global economy is at risk. Today, we are having troubles competing, especially with China. China has taken more than 2 million jobs in the last decade. That is a crazy amount. Think of how much that has affected our unemployment rate in the US. It is predicted that China's economy will surpass ours by the year 2030. Even though that may seem like a ways away, 17 years will be here before we know it. Also, the U.S. Department of Defense estimates that China is only 5 years behind the U.S. when it comes to the technology manufacturing. The fact that the U.S. is literally bankrupt pretty much makes it hard financially for them to be able to take much action. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that by 2020, U.S. debt will be so high that no money will remain for welfare, healthcare, education, etc. This would be very bad, obviously. Yes, some people do manipulate the system, but there are many people out there that truly do need the help. One reason the US is falling behind China is because China is taking advantage of the US because we are sticking to free trade when the rest of the world is not. Currently, the US faces a dilemma. We cannot completely stop trading with China without harming our own economy. However, if we consume too much, we are impoverishing the US, strengthening China, and creating even larger trade deficits unless China starts being more cooperative. What we are seeing now is a battle between two very different forms of capitalism. To win this battle, the U.S. needs to have a strong government and be prepared to stand behind its complaints. One strategy the U.S. can take to get back on top is to improve its competitiveness of its current system so that it can remain dominant. Another option it might try is to try converting China to free market ways like the U.S. itself uses. Now I will move on to Chapter 7, which is titled Re-Engineering the Capitalist System. First off, China has made its growing ambitions and motivation very clear over the past few years. Soon, products with labels saying Made in China, which we all know is a vast majority of our products, products will also read Designed in China. It will do just about everything its trading partners now do. National leaders around the world don't seem to fully grasp this picture. In reality, now is the time for leaders to take advantage of the hyper-competitive initiative and be on the offensive instead of the sideline. When it comes to the economic problem between the United States and China, the U.S. should do the following. First, it should reduce its dependence on China. Second, it should play on China's weaknesses to erode its strengths. Third, it should thwart China's future advantages. Fourth, it should disrupt China's current strategies and strengths. And fifth, it should undermine China's centers of gravity. I personally do believe that if our government does in fact feel threatened by China, they should definitely decrease their dependence on them. You never want to let someone or some country in this case feel as if they have an advantage on you. If the United States does take these actions, the best case scenario would be that China would be more open to U.S. exports and to play by fair trade rules. The United States must take these measures to rebuild and maintain its economic superiority, according to the author. As they say, the only good defense is a good offense, especially when fighting an opponent that will not play fairly. As I was saying before, one way for us to reduce our dependence on China is through a strategy of import substitution. As of 2010, among imports from China were 91 billion of electrical machinery, 83 billion of power generation equipment, 8 billion of iron and steel, and 7 billion of medical equipment. If we could just find our own way of producing some of these things in the US for cheap, we would obviously save some money and bring in some more jobs here. Another option to reduce dependence would be by choosing 10 critical industries to promote U.S. job growth and national security. The list would include things such as food, defense, electrical equipment, etc. If we could promote these industries enough, it would wipe out the 295 billion trade gap with China. However, I think this would be much harder than it sounds. That is a very big process. Another tactic talked about is that the U.S. could make a rule stating what gets consumed in the U.S. should be made in the U.S., basically saying buying American. This could be a legitimate way of channeling American consumers' money back to other Americans. Again, I think this would be a lot easier said than it is done. Obviously, if people can get a product cheaper from somewhere else, they are not going to care about buy American. It's just a human nature to get the best bang for your buck, as some people would say. The U.S. needs to play on China's weaknesses to erode its strengths. One of China's weaknesses are inadequate raw materials to fuel its growing economy and inadequate farmland. This gives the U.S. an upper hand. The U.S. could negotiate with supplier countries to keep China out. This could be a good plan on the United States' part because it would not only weaken China, but it would form kind of an alliance relationship with other countries. The United States needs to thwart China's future advantages by becoming the leader of global innovation. China's long-range plan is to become the world's central technological innovator by 2050. China is going to try and use its knowledge and educated workforce to reach beyond the U.S. in profitable industries. Currently, 34% of doctorates awarded in the United States in science and engineering go to temporary visa holders. Many of these holders are Chinese. Basically, the United States is training the young Chinese who will then compete with the United States upon their return to China. Once these students enter the Chinese workforce, the knowledge gained from our educational facilities will be used to better their industries. One tactic the U.S. could use to its benefit is to require foreign students to remain U.S. residents for a certain period of time after graduation. This would be a good idea because if people coming over know that they have to stay for a certain amount of time, they would probably want to get their life started in a career before forgetting everything that they learned here. The United States needs to undermine China like China has done to us. China has attacked our central source of wealth, the knowledge-based economy. It has also stolen a ton of intellectual property, undermining America's knowledgeable economy. These strategies by China have worked, and now the U.S. needs to approach planning strategies to undermine them. We need to go after their profit pools. Today, their most profitable industries are energy, banking, petrochemicals, and mobile telecom. All businesses in these industries will eventually be pouring money into China's profit pools. One option is for the United States to form everyone but China alliances with other countries around key industries, thus cutting China out of a large part of global trade. This could also backfire, though, because China might stop trade with us completely since we are trying to go against them. One strategy I believe would be a better choice is to exploit China's labor conditions. Some of their people work in slave-like conditions for very little pay. This low-cost labor force obviously saves money for China tremendously. The United States needs to take a firm stance against the sweatshop conditions and try to make other countries do the same. This would benefit the United States because then China would be forced to pay out more, but it would also benefit the well-being of China's people. At the beginning of Chapter 8, the author states how in his view, success is control over the rules of capitalism, and the rule maker gets to set the rules that advantage itself and force others to live by those rules. Although I do agree with capitalism, I do not agree with this definition. One question asked by many is whether cooperation in a win-win scenario is possible. The answer is yes. However, since China is not willing to play fair, the U.S. needs to take another route of action. Due to unfair trade, the United States needs to reinvent NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which currently does not set limits in disparity between exports and imports. NAFTA as a whole has failed, and doubled with EPA regulations, has given the U.S. unfair disadvantages as China can produce goods much cheaper and they have no costs incurred for pollutants cleanup. Your first question is what step that I would take if I was a U.S. policymaker. My answer is that I would rewrite the NAFTA agreement to be more favorable to the United States. I would also put tariffs on countries that aren't playing fair and not allowing as many imports from us as they allow exports. And yes, the US companies would be more happy about my plan because it would be more favorable to them and would make the market more of an even playing ground. Lastly, you asked what I believe that competitive landscape will look like in 50 years. I think that the competitive landscape will show that if things continue as they are going now, we will end up taking a back seat to China, economically as well as politically. They will pass us with all of their technological advances and education.